Sad.
Hi, my name is KATARINA Andjelkovic, and today I will talk about visual rhetoric and experiencing reality in the narrative configurations of space through a panoramic lens. This presentation analyzes the narration of space in panorama by identifying the critical role of irony as a rhetorical device. Could optical devices such as panorama, devised to represent distant places, be considered as an agent of irony? Since the earliest examples, panorama installations stressed scientific accuracy in depicting the scene and afforded particular attention to the spectator. Nevertheless, the panorama, invented by Robert Baker in 1787, is not merely a rational means of spatial understanding. I argue that early panorama makers such as Robert Barker and Robert Burford constitute a specific poetics of space in their panoramas. In the first example, we see an Irish-born painter, Robert Barker's panorama of Edinburgh from 1792, showing a view of Edinburgh and its environments. In another example, the panorama Battle of Waterloo, made 50 years later by Robert Burford, we see the description of a view of the Battle of Waterloo, with the disposition of the troops engaged in the action, fought on the 18th of June 1815. The panorama is painted from accurate drawings taken at the time and exhibited at the Panorama at Leicester Square in London. The hypothesis is that the authors of these panoramas do not simply use space as a background for the depicted historical event, or even an agent of representation, in a way that space becomes place and experience as the place of immersion, but also contribute to reveal space as a critical issue of architecture's own narrative configuration, in anticipation of the mechanism for representing and viewing architecture in panoramas. Firstly, I study irony in the literature and then a rhetorical device, as irony is a necessity for panorama painters and, in general, for all those who strive to embellish nature and to appeal to the imagination. Irony is a rhetorical figure primarily conveys the idea of incongruity in order to deprecate or ridicule a curse of action. As such, irony is an inexhaustible source of unusual ideas, fictional images, and interesting subjects. As the irony of the promised land that lay not across the threshold of death, but beyond the horizon, the panorama provides a symbolic journey around the horizon to offer a tableau of opportunities that is a newborn reality. Accordingly, the function of irony in the panoramic imagery is, among other motives, to reconcile the values of the real and the imaginary that the observers eventually register as irreconcilable. If space is the narrative conveyor shaped throughout the dramatization of action, then irony functions to promote the panorama as a stage for simulating fictional aspects of reality. For irony, of course, requires a foundation of a shared sense of what is real and true in the first place, in order for this foundation to be effectively disrupted, subverted, and satirized. However, in order to sell his work to the public, Barker would stress that the panorama did not bear the need for any kind of deception. Nevertheless, it is clear that Barker situates his work inside an artistic discussion, looking at imagination as a powerful tool to embody both the receiver's experience and the artist's intention. If we look at a dramatic variant of irony as the dominant rhetorical mode of historical narrative, the aim of the ironic undermining of intentions of the panorama authors was to present the events as realistically as possible, while scoffing at the truth of what they are describing. This connection will eventually provide conditions for explaining how irony affects the relationship between methods and contents, as becoming a mechanism for challenging understandings of the real. As literary technique, irony is a dissimulative rhetoric act in which the tenor and vehicle of one's language are often in deliberately playful conflict with one another, for the purposes of emphasizing paradox, incongruity, and humor. In this way, the articulation of panorama as a method of negotiating spatial and temporal distances makes it not only an experiential or scientific issue, but rather a rhetorical device. Thank you very much for your attention.